3 of 5. Reel 3, which was the final part of the film we saw that night, ended on a cliffhanger. Dr. Grady McKeon's Eden Orientation Series Part 3 was a true corker. At the end of it, all I could say at first was, holy shit. Robbie said, holy shit. Here's what happened in Reel 3. Fortunately for Dr. Grady McKeon and his company, it turned out that during the 1960s, anything that could look like corn and make your balls dissolve was of tremendous interest to the Department of Defense. McKeon Industries received its first of many lucrative contracts to develop the unstoppable weapons and later unstoppable soldiers. That was how the 6-foot-tall, tooth-armed mantises that were more powerful than grizzly bears came about. But that was through an accident of nature, too. By 1965, McKeon Industries employed 2,700 people in Ealing, Iowa. In 1965, Ealing, Iowa was a Cold War boomtown. That year, my father, Eric Andrew Zerba, who had been baptized in the Catholic Church, enrolled in kindergarten. After the mishap with the grasshopper semen and plant sperm experiment, McKeon Industries went back to work on a variety of theoretical methods aimed at stopping the global spread of communism. There were multiple units within the scientific department at McKeon Industries, each of which was developing its own creative anti-communist ideas. One of the units worked with the unstoppable corn material. In that particular lab, scientists attempted to invent some type of delivery system that would result in the testicular dissolution of enemy armies. Nobody would ever take an army of communists without balls seriously. Another of the units worked on a human replication project. It was the first attempt to actually clone soldiers. That was where the human head, penis, and the praying mantis hands in the jars came from. Robbie and I found those when we broke into Johnny McKeon's office the night we climbed up on the roof at Grasshopper Jungle. The human replication unit was also where the little two-headed boy was created. We found this out later. Reel 3 of the Eden Orientation series involved Robbie and me in ways we never anticipated. This is how it happened. The film showed how the Unstoppable Corn Lab team had been extracting cellular material from crop yields that had been stored in a silo on one of the remaining McKeon Industries Unstoppable Corn farms. Their goal was to dissolve Russian balls around the world. Later, I did find out that by researching archived records in Eden that President Richard Nixon had also brought some of Dr. Grady McKeon's Unstoppable Corn to China as a gift. It was in what was called Eden's brain room. I discovered a black and white photograph that showed the Prime Minister of China, a man whose name was Chow En-lai, eating some of Dr. Grady McKeon's Unstoppable Corn while the President of the United States looked on and smiled warmly. Prime Minister Chow En-lai's balls dissolved. When the Unstoppable Corn team began offloading silos of Unstoppable Corn in Iowa, they discovered the corn, when decaying, produced a new variety of mold that they had never seen before. They had never seen it before because the mold was an accident in nature. The mold gave off a blue, photoluminescent glow. This second accident of nature became known as Plague Strain 412E. There was no significance to 412E part of the name. The marketing division of McKeon Industries believed the name sounded good for sales pitch to the Defense Department, as though it came about after hundreds of trials and tests. In reality, 412E was just an accident of nature that occurred when scientists attempted to splice together the genetic material from grasshopper semen with plant sperm and fertilized corn with it. Scientists at McKeon Industries took the mold into their labs, where they grew great heaps of the stuff inside long glass boxes that looked like massive aquariums. They didn't know what to do with the mold, but they were fascinated by the sponge-like form of the mold and how it moved and pulsated and gave off light. Despite seeing it in the black and white film, Robbie and I recognized the familiar glow of the 412E mold and the camera captured its luminescence after the scientists in the film turned off the laboratory's lights. Dr. Grady McKeon, the film's narrator, said this: "Behold the wondrous glow of a new being." I said, "Ah." Shan said, "He's a little overly impressed by something that looks like rotten cauliflower." "That's the same shit Johnny had in his office," Robbie said. "What is?" Shan asked. "That shit," I said. Robbie added, yeah. Robbie Breeze and I had some explaining to do. "Your stepfather," I said, "had some of that stuff inside his office at From Attic to Cellar Consignment Store. Robbie and I saw it." "When were you inside Johnny's office?" Shan asked. "Shh," Robbie said, playing the part of the irritated moviegoer who's distracted by talkers at the theater. "Be quiet and listen to the film." Here was where Eden orientation series turned into a horror show. It turned into a horror show for two reasons. First, the scientists who were working on the Unstoppable Corn/Unstoppable Soldier project decided to try mixing the genetic material from the mold with a fresh sample of human blood. They decided to use Dr. Grady McKeon's own blood. Dr. Grady McKeon thought of himself as kind of God, so he drew his own blood to mix the genetic material from the photoluminescent mold to mix with. Yeah. It was not a good idea. The idea to mix human material with the 412E mold was even less reasonable than laboratory scientists deciding it was a good idea to smoke on the job and screw around with grasshopper semen by grafting it into plant sperm and injecting it into corn seeds. Dr. Grady McKeon's blood made the 412E mold very happy. Here was the beginning of the end of the world, and it took place in the 1960s. "This is the shit that was drawn on the blackboard in the lecture hall," I said. "Huh?" Shan said. Robbie said, "Uh-oh." It was all starting to come together. The roads were intersecting, but it got worse too. I said, "Robbie, hop back there and freeze the film on that part." Robbie, who was our projector monitor, said, "What?" "Back up to that part where the scientist is adding blood to the petri dish and stop it on that frame." Robbie did what I asked him to. And here was the second reason the Eden orientation series truly turned into a horror show right before our eyes. The scientist who was feeding the human blood to 412E was also happened to be starting an initial infestation event looked exactly like my father, Eric Andrew Zerba. Of course, the scientist in the film could not be my father, because Eric Andrew Zerba would have been in kindergarten at exactly the same time that portion of the film was shot. "Hey, Porcupine," Robbie said, "that guy looks like your dad." I said, Shan agreed. "He does look like your dad, Austin." The film was grainy, but we could all see how the scientist's lab coat had been monogrammed with the name Felix Zerba. It was my grandfather, Felix Zerba, whose father, like me, had been born with the name Ansridge. Felix Zerba, whose American name was Felix Zerba, was the first victim of McKeon Industries' plague strain 412E. Nobody knew anything about it. They sure found out fast, though. As we let the film play through, Dr. Grady McKeon's voice spoke over a series of frozen pictures. The pictures showed the faces of the scientists and the secretaries who worked with Felix Zerba at McKeon Industries. Dr. Grady McKeon explained how these brave patriots lost their lives while developing an unstoppable soldier to fight against communism. Unfortunately, the unstoppable soldiers McKeon Industries created were nothing more than accidents of nature resembling 6-foot-tall praying mantises with lightning-fast arms that were studded with rows and rows of needles sharp like barbed teeth. Unstoppable soldiers liked doing only two things: fucking and eating. They were nearly impossible to stop. Dr. Grady McKeon said that through research, scientists at McKeon Industries did find one way to stop his unstoppable soldiers. And that was exactly when Reel 3 of 5 ended. "We need to go back," I said. Shan said, "Back where?" We need to go back to Grasshopper Jungle. Robbie and I need to go back up on the roof. We left something up there, I said. What did you two leave there? Shan asked. I could have said a lot of things about Robbie, Breeze, and I left behind, about what Robbie and Breeze and I left behind on the roof of Grasshopper Jungle. I said, the rest of the film is up there, Shan. We need to see the rest of the film. Shan said, oh. And Robbie said, and I think we need to hurry. Ooh. Yeah, we'll get there. The orphan Felix. Felix Zerba was 9 years old when his father was killed. It happened at a place called Cisterna. Cisterna is in Italy. Answer Zerba had joined the United States Army in 1942. He enlisted in the army because he wanted to fight against Hitler, because he was so unhappy living in Iowa with Phoebe Hildebrandt. Answer Zerba was homosexual, but nobody knew anything about that. The only person who ever knew about that was Ansrich Zerba's homosexuality. About Ansrich Zerba's homosexuality was Herman Weinbach. Herman Weinbach died from pneumonia in Midvale, Iowa in 1934. Ansrich Zerba never got to meet Herman Weinbach's uncle, a man named Bruno Wagner, who performed with Bruno's amazing and incredible dogs with a circus in California. In the summer of 1944, Ansrich Zerba was shot through the back of his head while he was crouching down to take a shit in a little place called Cisterna, Italy. He received a medal for getting killed while shitting. Ansrich Zerba's great-grandson, Eric Christopher Zerba, also received a medal for having his balls torn off by an unstoppable homemade bomb. Dulce et decorum est. Felix Zerba was very intelligent. He graduated from high school in Iowa City at the age of 14. His mother, Phoebe Hildebrandt, remarried when Felix was 10 years old. Phoebe Hildebrandt began having sexual intercourse after the long, lonely spell that followed the time Ansrich Zerba stole her virginity and gave her his son, Felix. Phoebe Hildebrandt hated Felix's name. Against Felix's will, Phoebe Hildebrandt had her new husband, whose name was Daniel Barton, adopt the boy and change his name to Felix Barton. It is a little-known fact of history that I was nearly named Austin Barton, a name that has the kind of ringing sound Iowans appreciate. Daniel Barton owned a radio station in Iowa City. He was 52 years old when he married Phoebe Hildebrandt in 1954. Daniel Barton had defective semen. He had a low sperm count, but Daniel Barton never knew anything about it. He never knew because his wife Phoebe became pregnant 3 times from 3 different men before Felix graduated from high school. Daniel Barton was convinced he had very powerful sperm. Phoebe Barton was a real dynamo at having sexual intercourse with numerous men in Iowa City. Phoebe Barton was unstoppable. She liked doing exactly the same 2 things that Bugs liked to do. Phoebe Barton never knew how much she would enjoy sexual intercourse until Ansrich Zerba was shot in the head while taking a shit. Before that, Phoebe only believed that sexual intercourse was painful, interminably long, and sad, that it would make you bleed. Phoebe Barton's 3 new children, a boy named Eldon Wayne and 2 girls, Chastity and Linda, were presumed by everyone to be full-blooded Bartons. Daniel Barton believed it too. Phoebe Barton's youngest daughter, whose name was Linda, was a product of semen that was produced in the testicles of Felix's high school physics teacher. After Felix Barton, whose real name was Felix Zerba, but was called Felix Zerba by American people, graduated high school at the very young age of 14. Daniel Barton and his wife, Phoebe, enrolled the boy in Stanford University. Stanford University is in a place called Palo Alto, California. Palo Alto means tall stick in Spanish. There are many big trees near Stanford University. Spanish missionaries were real good at naming shit. Felix Barton was very lonely and unhappy in California. At Stanford, Felix tried to kill himself once by mixing chemicals that created a poisonous cloud of gas. It was not a good idea. Felix Barton only ended up burning the lining of his airways. As a result, Felix Barton, who had been born Felix Zerba, had a chronic cough for the rest of his life. After he graduated the university, Felix had his name legally changed back to Felix Andrzej Zerba. He sometimes went by Felix Zerba because Americans got so uptight about all those bunched up consonants and shit like that. Felix married a Catholic Polish girl he met in California. His wife was named Czesnia. She was very beautiful. Czesnia Zerba was my grandmother. Unlike his adopted father, Daniel Barton, Felix Zerba did not have any problems at all with his sperm. In 1960, when Felix was 25 years old, his first son, Eric Andrzej Zerba, was born. Eric Andrzej Zerba was my father, Eric Zerba. Felix and Czesnia Zerba had 4 more strong Polish sons together. Their names were Krys, Mieszko, Gawrys, and Jacek. In 1965, Felix Zerba and his family moved back to Iowa, to Ealing, where Felix accepted a position in the research laboratories at McKean Industries. In 1968, Felix Zerba was killed in a motorcycle accident. The history recorded in the Waterloo paper described how Felix Zerba apparently lost control over his motorcycle and ran himself beneath the wheels of a freight car that was carrying liquid fertilizer. The fertilizer was made in Ealing, Iowa. What actually happened to Felix Andrzej Zerba that day was this. Felix Andrzej Zerba hatched out. Felix means lucky. Felix Zerba was the first unstoppable soldier. Dun dun dun. We are getting close. Night.